Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Jet Rails podcast. I'm Robert, your host. Today, we're going to be talking about Amazon, but in a little bit of a different way. We often talk about Amazon as it relates to competition in the market. And today, we're actually going to be talking a little bit about Amazon as a place that you can grow your audience, and not just by listing your products there, but also as an advertising platform. And so I'm joined by Joseph from the Perpetua team, who has lots of great experience with Amazon's display advertising and other advertising tools. And Joseph, would you do the honor of introducing yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I'm Joseph from Perpetua. I lead our sales division here. And to tell you a little bit more about Perpetua, so we're an optimization and enablement tool for e-commerce advertisers. So we work with brands, media agencies, large sellers on Amazon's platform to work with them to deliver an optimal advertising experience. So right now, today, we're focused on Amazon. We've expanded into Instacart as well. We're quickly expanding into additional platforms. And basically, our goal is to provide you very simple to use tools with high sophistication so that you can get the most out of your advertising on any e-commerce site.
Cool. And thinking immediately about Amazon and their marketplace, what are some of the general advertising opportunities? Because I know obviously if you have products listed there, that Amazon is very happy to take your money as a seller to promote those items and otherwise to draw more attention to your listings there. But what's the general gist of it as a platform? If I'm an e-commerce merchant interested in driving more brand awareness or driving people to purchase directly from me, whether from my Amazon listings or from my own e-commerce website.
Yeah. So if I were to kind of start off holistically, you can break down Amazon advertising into two main buckets. So your first bucket would be ads that are native to the shopping experience on Amazon. And so these are sponsored ads, and sponsored ads primarily surface themselves in ways that they are part of the way that you shop on Amazon. So you search a keyword or a search term that's relevant for the product you're trying to find. You may see ads at the top of the page, middle of the page, page 5. Once you click on a listing, you might additionally see ads beside or below that listing. And so these are all part of your shopping experience on Amazon. The other side is through Amazon's display network, which allows you to leverage all of the first party data that Amazon has on shopper behavior and behavior on Amazon's ever expanding ways to work with you as a consumer, like IMDb TV and Twitch and Prime Video. And you can create audiences and target people across the web to either drive those audiences back to your Amazon listing or to any other site, really, if you want to be driving them to your own Shopify or BigCommerce store, or if you want to be driving them to another page, you can do that with Amazon's DSP, their demand side platform.
Interesting. So is pretty much everything in terms of Amazon advertising going through that DSP, through the demand side platform? Or is that one of several tools that help to manage different types of ads? I know that they've been evolving through the years. I haven't actually seen it lately.
The two ones would be, all within Amazon's advertising network or Amazon's advertising portal, call it. You have the opportunity for sponsored ads, which anybody can access. And those are the ones that are native to the shopping experience. And then Amazon's demand side platform, which would not be native to the shopping experience, which is not just for people who sell on Amazon. It's pretty much open to any advertisers. And those are basically your two options, sponsored advertising and DSP advertising.
So sort of one avenue to go through, and I'll kind of equate it to Google, where they've got, search results. They've got, their display network for ad banners and other ads they're going to show across a network of third-party sites. And then you've got things like YouTube advertising and other things that they've got additional options for. So a lot under one roof. And what's the general billing model for these different types of ads, and especially the ads that are going to drive people back to a Magento or BigCommerce or Shopify or WooCommerce or some kind of a private e-commerce site, not to an Amazon.com page or something within an Amazon app?
Yeah. So on the DSP, it's a CPM billing model. different versus sponsored ads, which is primarily CPC. So there's exceptions to both, but we can broadly say that on the DSP, it's CPM, cost per impression, and then on sponsored ads, it's CPC, cost per click on the ad.
Interesting. Okay. So if you're trying to drive an immediate sale through Amazon's platform, they're tracking all those success measures and going at that by cost per click. It probably makes a lot of sense, and that's why they're making that available. But if you're driving people outside of Amazon, then cost per 1,000 impressions or such is going to be the overall bid strategy. So when you engage in that, is there and this is getting a little specific, but is there kind of an entry level that you think of for starting off in terms of budgets and bids to really drive some audience, drive some metrics, some data to analyze to see what's going on? Is there sort of that entryway? Because I know that with a lot of platforms, if you throw a few dollars in, you're really not giving yourself enough of a data set to test with. You're not really learning enough. And depending, like for instance, impressions and clicks and things in some platforms like LinkedIn are comparatively expensive in some cases. Obviously, it depends on what your targeting parameters are. You could say the same of Google. There are things that cost pennies, and then if you want people searching for, I don't know, for mortgage refinancing, you're going to you could be paying a lot of money per click. You could spend a lot of money very fast.
Yeah. I would almost say that the best place to start in even answering that intelligently is thinking about, as an advertiser, what is your shopper, or if you're not necessarily selling a product, what is the consumer journey? So thinking about the full funnel options of advertising, sponsored ads are primarily bottom of funnel ads. So I think of it broadly as when you're running sponsored ads that are part of Amazon's native shopping experience, you're essentially casting a net and trying to capture those shoppers that are already on Amazon's platform looking to make a purchase. With the DSP, it's more of throwing a spear. So you're building audiences on those ideal customers that you're trying to find, and then you're serving them ads broadly over the web. The way, and this obviously makes sense in terms of the model of how they bill of cost per click versus cost per 1,000 impressions, is that you're going to have different success metrics for each of those. The higher you go up in the funnel, so if you're going over some higher brand building tactics, you're typically going to need larger budgets because you're looking to reach a wider audience rather. And then at the same time, you're not going to be necessarily using the exact same metrics to measure success. So the same way it wouldn't necessarily make sense if I were running a TV ad to immediately look 5 days later and say, okay, who bought my product for my TV ad? You might look at brand equity and brand health metrics. And generally in that case, again, you're casting a wider net. While your cost to reach an individual person is going to be less, you're going to be spending more money broadly. And so one of the things in terms of entry levels is that with Perpetua, when we work with many clients on Amazon's DSP, our entry level is $10,000 a month. Amazon's might commonly be $35,000 a month. That's definitely not to say it's always $35,000 a month. Mm-hmm. There's exceptions. 10,000 is definitely on the lower end in the market to get started. And that's really not just because, hey, we're trying to get bigger budgets out of people. It's all about, hey, if you're looking at the DSP, you're trying to leverage it to actually achieve what it's designed for. If you're focused 100% just on ROAS, for example, and you're saying, hey, I'm only looking to immediately convert shoppers, your experience on the DSP is less likely to be fulfilling. You're more likely to be frustrated by the results. You're more likely to be dissatisfied with your options for advertising. Just by nature, you're probably going to be focusing primarily on clicks, which is not even how you're going to be billed in the first place. And so the minimum budgets and where we've come up with $10,000 is not an arbitrary number. It's what's going to give our advertisers the best chance of success, what's going to give them a smooth budget throughout the month so we can spend that money effectively and not blow through it immediately during the day. And so that's our position on that.
That's interesting. So, very tough to focus on direct, immediate sales, people clicking and buying and in one session. At that point, you've got more of an attribution question of, okay, like other types of display advertising and other similar campaign opportunities out there, you're building audience, you're building brand awareness and brand affinity in different ways, by being in people's minds while they're on Amazon, and while they're basically the equivalent of in the digital mall, they're out there shopping, and obviously there's going to be some level of click through, but they were specifically shopping on Amazon, so you might get them in a good moment, but it's going to be hard to expect a very high immediate ROI from that click. Because they weren't specifically searching or otherwise looking to come to your site. So I'd say very similar to other more traditional advertising, whether it was TV or radio or newsprint or billboards or what have you, that people see your advertising, and over time, they might have to see it a few times to have the impact that you're hoping for. It's not all about immediate ROI, but you do the math and you track and you look for that lift, and you hope that, and that's the challenge in some of those old mediums is, can you get in front of the right audience? So I think in this case, some of the bigger question that I have, what are the parameters like when it comes to targeting? Because one of the reasons that I think that this is particularly interesting is because of all the juicy targeting data. I mean, Amazon knows everything about their shoppers and then some. They know things about their shoppers that their shoppers don't know about themselves. So
exactly.
Is that a lot of the power of it? Is it being able to really serve up targeted ads to targeted user segments, segments of shoppers?
So there's a few things that I would really call the power of Amazon's DSP. So one of them being that first-party data is going to be more and more relevant for advertisers, well documented. I mean, I don't know how many articles are titled something with death of the cookie inside of the title of the article. And so first-party data is going to be increasingly important for advertisers. Really what differentiates any DSP is first-party data and inventory available. And so if you look at Amazon's, their data is increasing in two primary ways. So one, they collect shopper behavior data. So what products you're clicking on, what products you're buying, what the cycles are of those purchases. If it's a highly consumable product, how long it takes you to purchase over and over and over again. And so this is, like I said, shopping behavior data, and that's increasing because more people, of course, this year or over the past year are shopping online. So they have an increased shopper behavior data. The other side of it is that Amazon's web is increasing in terms of how they interact with you as a consumer. So if you are watching a stream on Twitch, or you're watching Prime Video, if you're watching IMDb TV, they're collecting data on your behaviors in those instances as well. And so they're increasing the amount of data points that they're collecting to be able to advertise on. So that's the data side of it. And then the other side of it is the inventory portion. So what inventory is available for me to serve my ad as an advertiser? And so a lot of the focus goes towards, Amazon owned and operated sites. So how your ads appear right on Amazon.com or sites like IMDb that they own. But then increasingly as well, kind of goes hand in hand with that data portion. Prime Video increasing in prevalence, Twitch increasing in prevalence. These are all now creating more opportunities for supply of those ads. So instead of just focusing primarily on Amazon.com for where your ad's going to be served, you can broaden that scope. And what's really exciting about a lot of that as well is that it's more and more opportunities for OTT ads, for video ads. I always say, if you look at Facebook in the early days before video ads, it's kind of like nothing was a video ad until everything was a video ad. As soon as it could be, then everything was a video ad. And frankly, if I had to predict, I'd say I think Amazon might go in a similar direction.
We know that Americans and those in other parts of the world consume more and more video through digital means, and I can see that really being important for the overall strategy for this advertising platform. Like most platforms, I think that there's just a lot of media consumed this way now, so it becomes a good way to get into people's homes and to get in front of them in the right time at the right place. And with good targeting data. you've been mentioning different inventory. Is everything that goes through Amazon's DSP an Amazon owned property, or are there any, because, when you go through Google or Bing or others, there are those third party networks that they have available of news sites and blogs and other sites where you can display ads.
Yeah, so those third-party networks are also available through Amazon's DSP. Of course, what's going to differentiate Amazon from an inventory standpoint is what they control. But yeah, absolutely, those third-party networks are also available to advertise through.
Interesting. And does that mean it's also a good platform to potentially run some remarketing campaigns through to track some of the data in terms of who's clicking over to the site or interacting with certain things, and to keep showing them ads in different places?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it can be overly simplified, but sometimes oversimplifying it gives you the best results. Is if you think about, depending on the type of product you're going to sell. So I'll give two very, very different examples here. Is like, one, I sell a one-time purchase. It's high price point. Maybe I might buy a new model of that product 10 years from now. Or on the flip side, I buy a highly consumable product, I don't know, toilet paper, laundry detergent, whatever it is. You use retargeting as an example. The way that I'm going to retarget my shoppers is going to be very, very different in those two instances. So for example, you might be focused primarily on remarketing. So targeting people who have already purchased your product if you're selling a highly consumable product, versus obviously you wouldn't do that if you're selling a high price point product that's only going to be purchased once. And so a lot of that goes into the way that you're going to be building out your audiences and the actual inventory where your ad is going to be most relevant. And so if I'm selling that high price point product, it takes a while that I have to really push my shopper through the journey to get them to purchase. I need to understand how they behave. If they, I'm not going to immediately send them an ad that's going to try and get them to convert if my product costs $1,800 and they've never even heard of what its main benefit is, versus if I'm selling a granola bar, that might make a little bit more sense given where I'm targeting them. So it all comes down to understanding your specific shopper's journey, understanding how you can take advantage of the different targeting options within Amazon's DSP, and then also making sure that you're taking into account where you're going to get the most bang for your buck from an inventory standpoint as well.
And do some users bring some of their own audience, like lookalike audiences, bringing in email lists or other data sets to try to target through this platform specifically?
Yeah, like building lookalike audiences for email lists, for pixel lists, drives a lot of value. What is very vague right now, but I think is coming together a little bit more and more and more, is the Amazon Marketing Cloud, so AMC, which is essentially a cloud-based environment where you can, I guess to simplify it, you can better understand how your shopper interacts with your ads across both different ad units on Amazon, different ad networks on Amazon, so that you aren't just only thinking about it of, hey, okay, last touch attribution model. This shopper saw this ad and then purchased this product. I can actually connect the dots more to say, okay, they saw this ad at this time, and then a week later they saw this, and then they made this search, and then they clicked on this sponsored ad. So I can kind of put together those pieces. And then there's opportunities to also for advertisers to add in their own data into that environment as well to just strengthen what they're learning about the shopper journey. What I would say right now is like, hey, details on the specifics of how that exactly comes together, probably not the best person to ask. At Perpetual, we're experimenting a lot within our business intelligence and data strategy teams, which is really exciting. And I think that's one of the things that is definitely going to become more and more prominent for anyone who's a serious advertiser on Amazon.
Yeah, I'll admit I'm a few years out from physically managing anything in terms of ads with Amazon, but I remember having to go through third parties like DoubleClick and what have you, because the tools there on their own weren't really going to do justice. That you really needed a third party. I've seen some interesting case studies from your team. Cool video on your homepage where I think that's part of the challenge, is taking it from you mentioned 35,000 as an entry, and trying to get to a point where it may not be the first platform that someone's going to run display ads in. But once you're more established and you're trying to, focus on different targets and different markets and other things, seems like a great place to expand just logically, based on people being in a shopping mode, based upon the available data sets and targeting. And, aside from just the amount of money, around how long do you typically recommend running a campaign in order to see if it's going to meet expectations or not? I know that data doesn't come in a day, and that typically neither does fine tuning. That on day one you spin things up, but then you're looking at the winners and losers and you're adjusting around it in pretty much any of these campaigns. What type of a normal timeline do you recommend people start with in order to manage expectation?
Yeah, so I think, again, what it goes back to primarily is working with the advertiser to make sure that we've got an understanding of the shopper journey, and that we are building timelines to evaluate performance and keep metrics to evaluate performance that match that. So again, if my shopper journey is a 3 to 4 month timeline, because it's a high purchase product, I'm not going to be evaluating campaigns after 3 weeks or 4 weeks and determining whether or not they work, because that doesn't fit with how my shopper is going to learn and be educated on my product and then eventually purchase my product. On the flip side, again, if it's a highly consumable product, they may have a shorter window to find out exactly what's working. If I know people repurchase my product every 3 weeks, let's say, or every 6 weeks, whatever it may be, I may be structuring campaigns and targeting that's based on people who purchased my product or a competitor's product that's similar with that specific look back window. And so I can get a better understanding of performance in a shorter time frame. So it really depends on what your objectives are. And then, like I said, hand in hand, the key metrics that you're looking at have to match your strategic objective as well. Because, top of funnel, again, you're not going to use ROAS to measure a top of funnel advertising campaign. Just like you're not going to, or similar to, if you're focused on increasing the number of people that are purchasing your product, you might look at new to brand, whereas you would never look at new to brand, obviously, on retargeting. So there's a lot of simple parts of that and more complex parts of that. But shopper journey is just so critical.
Yeah. Look, in advertising, the proof's in the pudding. Either it's working or it doesn't. Or it's not at some point. That this is very data driven. You can either see lift in certain metrics at certain junctures, or you don't. When you see a campaign fail, because I imagine that's the nature of it, that this is a test and measure business. That as an agency, as a product, you don't stay afloat too long if at some point you can't prove your value. And no one in this industry is looking for a 3 month or 5 month turnover in clients and so on and so forth. It doesn't, and bad reviews and other things. And none of that works out well. But is there a common thread when you see these campaigns less successful? Does it have to do with let's say in the e-commerce world, with the product or pricing or something having to do with their site or something in particular? Is there anything that you've seen where, you at this point look at it and say, that's probably not going to, I don't know if this is a campaign that's going to go well here. And I'll give you an example. I in my agency days, I used to run into at least a couple of times a year a book author that would come by and say, build me a website and let's start advertising my book, which was, let's say, a hardcover that was going to retail for, I don't know, $19.95. And they had one product and, driving people to buy one book from, and obviously the publisher made money, their agent made money, that their margin on it was slim, so if I had, $4 to work with to advertise to get someone to buy a book, not from Amazon, but from their website, like I would tell them, go on a book tour, go work with your agent some more, go, I know how to get you out there more. And yes, it's good to have a website to drive people to, so they're aware of you and maybe you get booked for, for more speaking engagements and other things, but I didn't have a good advertising mix that was going to drive them good ROI. There wasn't going to be good ROAS from pretty much any campaign that I could come up with on the paid ad side. have you run into any sort of similar circumstances or data sets?
Yeah, I mean, like where we've seen failures are primarily based around unrealistic expectations. And so those show themselves or make themselves prevalent in a couple different ways. One of them we've already talked about a little bit is having unrealistic or not using the correct metrics to measure the success of a campaign, or to have an incorrect view as to when a campaign should start driving results, and then making irrational decisions based on data that doesn't align with what you intended to be doing. So if you have the wrong idea of what metrics you should be looking at, if you're measuring a top of funnel campaign with ROAS, you're then going to look at that data. It's going to look disappointing to you. You're going to make tweaks and decisions on your campaigns that are not going to be in your best interest because there was a misalignment in your strategy and your objectives from the get-go. The other side of it is, and this is a lot more broad, is the idea of, if I've been running sponsored ads for a really long time on Amazon, now I'm saying, okay, I want to increase the audience I reach. And so now I'm going to start running DSP ads. Basically considering it to be a magic pill, for lack of a better word, to say, hey, okay, I feel like I've maxed out on sponsored ads. Now I'm just going to immediately get the exact same return by starting to run DSP ads. And, a very common thread that, we can hear from people is they'll do a simple calculation to say, okay, here's what I can afford in terms of a customer acquisition cost based on my product margins and my product cycles, and say, if I can hit this number, I'll spend all day long. It's such a common thing that we hear. Which is great. That is a great data point for us to know in terms of what we need to make the customers' campaigns profitable and what they're aiming towards. But to just come into it and say, okay, here's the number. If we can hit this as a customer acquisition cost, we'll just continue to spend, and then no additional strategy or insights behind that. And so DSP it's not a magic pill. It's not just, all right, let's get it up and running, and then I'll immediately get that 6 ROAS that I expect, or 10. Or 15 ROAS, whatever it may be. And so it's primarily about expectations, and then also ensuring that we are going in there with a specific outcome that we're expecting to achieve and a strategy to get to that outcome, not just an outcome based on here's the profitability number I need to hit. And like, I don't know anything other than that. Let's just start the ads, because that can be a recipe for failure, frankly.
That's interesting. I would think, though, that that's probably a very similar experience, whether you're running ads in Google's display network, or you're running ads on Quora or Reddit, or, pick your platform, right? That anytime that you're involved in these types of campaigns that are more passive, that someone wasn't actively searching for something, they're seeing an ad and you're hoping that that they're in the right frame of mind and that it starts them on the right journey. This is the challenge. It's not about the one-click sale.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think about it, and I in the last week or so, this comes more and more to the front of my mind when I think about Walmart rebranding Walmart Media Group to Walmart Connect, and now they're partnering with the Trade Desk to have their own DSP as well. And just reading a lot of what people think are going to be the biggest benefits of that, and thinking about how it'd be relevant for our advertisers as well, is take that example where someone comes in, they know exactly what their customer acquisition cost needs to be profitable, or what ROAS, let's say, they need to be profitable. Say, hit a 4 ROAS, and I'll just spend. I'll never stop spending. I'll keep spending. Think of it as an example. And the reason I use Walmart Connect is that they really want to be able to connect the dots between an in-store experience and their display network. If I run an ad that gets me 1,000 people to purchase, and I have no idea what it was that made people purchase, that's one scenario, and it's unfortunate that I don't know exactly what happens. If I now run an ad again where 1,000 people purchase, but now I get a lot of data to find out exactly why people purchased, and I get a ROAS number attached to it, does that make my business more profitable or not? And the reality is that you still got 1,000 purchases. It's very impactful to have that data to know exactly why someone purchased, or how that shopper purchased.
I mean, if you're slicing and dicing your marketing spend and you're trying to figure out what's actually working, It's very hard to keep throwing money into the wind and, just throwing everything at the wall and you can't even see what's sticking. That's very, very difficult. So absolutely, you want to be able to have some attribution of where some of the lift is coming from, but at the same time,
yeah. You want to have that attribution, but then you don't want to use that attribution and say, "Oh my God, we're at a 5 ROAS." Like spend millions of dollars when you might have been there previously. You just didn't necessarily connect the dots, and that's why I think it's very dangerous when you don't have a specific strategy coming into it. You're only focused on a ROAS number. You might just be essentially subsidizing your organic purchases in that case, and you have to come in being aware of that and with that strategy and outcome set in mind.
Well, and it's equally to me interesting that, let's say that you can get someone, 5 times ROAS, that you can do some great things. But, and they say, well, let's do more. Let's, turn up the faucet. It might be that with the targeting parameters that are really working for them, that's as much as they can get. That if you can up the spend and go after more audience, but the audience might not be as good, and that additional audience might have a much lower return on ad spend. So, sometimes it's the finesse that gets lost in the conversation when you just try to think about everything as a raw number and not as a larger campaign and not as part of a larger strategy.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to pivot for a second here because you spend a lot of time in the marketplace space in general. Any predictions or anything interesting for the future of Amazon's marketplace? Or I'll open it up even further. Other marketplaces that seem to be, growing more and opening more. You talked a little bit about Walmart. I know that they're not alone in seeing growth in that space as e-commerce really was just skyrocketing further than anyone, of course, predicted at the beginning of 2020 and has continued to.
Yeah, well, I shared one prediction earlier that I think video is going to continue to be of increasing importance on all types of ads that are run on Amazon. So I think we'll continue to see that over the next year, plus video ads showing themselves more in both the native shopping experience and Amazon's DSP. I've shared as well that it's all about unique data and unique inventory when you're thinking about what's going to add the most value to anyone who's investing through your DSP. And with that is going to, I think, come more and more e-commerce platforms having their own native platforms for advertising. So if you think about Walmart, we've already talked about them a little bit. Instacart's ad business is continuing to grow, and you'll see that become more sophisticated with more advertising options. Target, a lot of the other grocery chains like Kroger in the US, other platforms, Wayfair for furniture, home improvements done so well. I think you're going to continue to see retailers and online retailers build out their own advertising networks. And, we've already talked about the importance of first party data, and specifically with all that death of the cookie stuff, as I talked about, the importance of that first party data will only fuel that even further to say, hey, we want to have our own, our own DSP, let's say, or our own self-serve search advertising platform within our website. And it'll be interesting to see how the partnerships play out in that, in terms of who partners with who to be able to stand those things up. We said Walmart with the Trade Desk. We've got Amazon on its own right now, and it'll be interesting to see how everybody else goes about that themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think at some point, a lot of brands and merchants, not necessarily talking about the Fortune 500 companies out there, but you can manage just so many things at once. You can split your attention and your dollars and your team in just so many directions at once. And so I think that at some point becomes the challenge is, where do we pull from? Where do we really put our effort? I'm with you though, that I think that for a lot of these larger companies that have all these eyeballs on their websites and apps and such, Google is not a search company; they're a data company, and the same can be said of so many others, right? That Facebook is not specifically a social network as many of us see it. It's a data company. That's what they sell. They don't sell social networking to you and I. I don't pay them for that.
Exactly. It's that old adage, if you don't pay, you're the product.
That's right. So it makes sense that more and more of these companies are going to take that approach. I think, as with everything else, that there'll be stronger winners in some categories than others. That we'll just have to wait and see for some of it. But before we wrap up, final advice for merchants that want to drive more traffic, more engagement with their own e-commerce sites? Because I know that part of the challenge here that e-commerce businesses face is that when the shopper is engaged with Amazon, they don't really have much of a relationship with the brand, with the seller. And the same can be said of a lot of these other marketplaces and such, that you lose out on some of the ability to continue to market to that user, to build more rapport there, to have that stronger customer lifetime value, because on a marketplace like Amazon, the sale is generally going to go to whoever lists something the cheapest, or, things get knocked off, things, you can't, obviously, big brands don't usually have as many problems with it, but I've seen plenty of SMB and mid-market players get kicked off of Amazon. Even if it's short term, it's painful. You have much less control. Any last thoughts on driving the relationships with the customers, with the shoppers, back to your own sites and driving long-term success that way?
Yeah, well, I think, you can always focus primarily on the tests that you run and the ad units that you invest in to make sure that they primarily promote and drive that traffic to your own site, so you can maintain that relationship. The piece of advice that I would say more so, it might go in the opposite direction of the question to a certain extent, is I think you should be very careful about not allowing your customer to buy your product where they want to shop. And so you can add a ton of value, and many brands, specifically luxury brands, have been very successful by having a walled garden and having one place to buy their product. Classic Peloton. I was going to buy a Peloton 5 months ago. I'd probably be getting it right now. I haven't bought it yet. We'll see. But for the most part, you want to make your product available for where your shopper wants to shop. 50 years ago, you would go to 7 different stores to buy all the things that you needed for your household. Now you probably go to one place, or you just go to Amazon, or whatever it may be, you make your shopping trip on Instacart. And so I think that there's a lot of potentially unknown, I don't want to say unknown harm, but obviously the amount of incremental value you can gain by having that direct customer relationship is huge. There's also a lot of incremental value you can have by making sure that your product is available and most prominent wherever your shopper wants to shop. And so definitively saying, hey, we're not going to invest in any other retail channels or any other e-commerce platforms may make sense for your brand, but it might not. And I think it's just a question that you need to take very seriously. And your brand presence and brand affinity all goes into that. But I think it's something that sometimes gets overlooked and assumed. I need this customer relationship. I'm not going to be spending money on any other platforms, where you might help yourself by making your product more available to where your customers want to shop.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think that there are a lot of really great financial planners or others out there that are going to tell you to put all of your eggs in one basket. If give or take 50% of shoppers are going right to Amazon, right? They're searching there for things. If you're not there, you're certainly at risk that their money is being spent elsewhere. So, yeah. Joseph, this was a pleasure. I appreciate you coming on today. Any parting words for the audience?
No parting words for the audience. I really enjoyed it as well. It's a topic that's just constantly evolving. And so anytime I have the opportunity to share my thoughts of the team at Perpetua, I think we'll continue to see more and more come together with both Amazon's DSP, other platforms, and their DSPs in the coming months and years, and it'll be exciting. Awesome.
Well, I really appreciate your time today. For our audience, thanks as always for tuning in, and we look forward to bringing you more great content like this here on the Jet Rails podcast really soon. Happy selling out there.